Our final TED speaker is Michael Santos. He spent 26 years incarcerated in the federal prison system for cocaine trafficking. While he was in prison, he earned an undergraduate degree, then he earned a graduate degree. He became a published author, including books, numerous journal articles. Since leaving prison last year, he's become an outspoken advocate for penal reform and new approaches to the American scandal known as recidivism. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Santos.
Thank you very much, Russ. Appreciate it. Thank you. Do I have the slide? So, thank you guys so much for giving me this opportunity to share my story. It may be a little bit unusual to be in an extraordinary audience like this of business leaders, community innovators, people who make society grow, to listen to a man who just got out of prison. But today is an extraordinary day for me because it is actually 6 months to the day that I finished 26 years in federal prison. And that is the reason that I have this huge commitment to working to end our nation's commitment to mass incarceration. The earlier speakers today gave some very profound insight into why we as a nation need to understand how those who live on the fringes, those who live on the margins, think. That is the reason that I care so much about mass incarceration. I want to take you back to the beginning and let you know what led me into that system. Back in the mid-1980s, a popular movie came out. That movie influenced me much as popular culture influences people who don't respond well to traditional educational systems. For me, in my life, it was Tony Montana who influenced me, and as a consequence of being influenced by those bad decisions, I made every bad decision a young man could make. And as a consequence of those bad decisions for trafficking in cocaine, I was arrested, I was indicted, I was sentenced to serve 45 years in federal prison. So bad influences started my life and my journey, but it was later good influences that helped to change my life. Because while I was sitting inside of a jail cell, during that awkward phase between the time that I was arrested and the time that I was convicted and the time that I was sentenced, I happened to recognize what a horrific decision I had made as a young man. And so while I'm sitting in jail and I'm feeling the walls closing in on me, the life being sucked out of me, I start turning anywhere for guidance. And through prayer, I am led to the work of Socrates. The work of Socrates inspires me because Socrates at that time is also facing the rest of his life in a prison cell before he is about to be executed. And when he is given this opportunity to leave that prison cell and to live in civilization and exile, he chooses instead to have his sentence carried out. And when he asks why, I remember reading this, and I'm in a jail cell. It's the first time I'm reading about philosophy, the first time I'm reading about Socrates. And when he chooses to stay in a jail cell, he gives a reason. He says that in a democracy, we have the right to work toward changing laws, but we don't have the right to break laws. And I remember putting that book on my chest and started thinking, what can I do? Is there anything I can do while I move through this sentence that could keep me in prison for the rest of my life? Is there anything I can do to reconcile with society? And so I start thinking about many of you, the leaders in this room. I said, what would you expect? Is there anything that a man can do to transform his life? Is there anything that I could do that would help you in this audience see me as something more than a coke dealer? And the thought is, yes, there probably is. But what is it? Because I don't get that message inside of the criminal justice system. We may call it a system of corrections, but in reality, it is a system that warehouses humanity. And to believe that the system has an effort in preparing people inside to return to society as a law-abiding, contributing citizen is equivalent to believing that Philip Morris really wants people to stop smoking. This is a system that measures justice by the turning of calendar pages. And it is a fundamentally flawed system. It is a fundamentally flawed system because it is fundamentally different from what makes Silicon Valley great. A community of innovators, disruptive thinkers. You look at failure and you figure out a better way of doing it. That's what I learned from reading better influences in my life. And so when I thought about each of you 26 years ago, I thought, what would you expect me to do? You would expect me to work to educate myself. You would expect me to work toward contributing to society in a meaningful, measurable way. You would expect me to build a support network. That was all. That's what guided me through the journey. I strove to become the change that I wanted to see in the world. And I was inspired by people like Gandhi, by people like Mandela, by people who faced struggle, whether it was prisoners of World War II or whether it is prisoners of today. Anybody who could overcome it, that became my inspiration because I had a vision. And that vision, I'd like to say, was my idea. But like Steve Jobs said, a good leader copies ideas, a great leader steals ideas. And all I did was steal ideas from every individual who is sitting inside of this room tonight. You achieve high levels of success because you pursue excellence. And you reward others when they pursue excellence. But in America's prison system, we measure justice in a fundamentally different way. We measure justice by enough calendar pages turned. And we have seen the results of that approach. We need to change that approach. We need an approach that will help people inside pursue the same path that each of you pursue. What is that path? Visualize, plan, execute. That's what makes Silicon Valley great, but it doesn't exist for 2.3 million people who are serving time. But I had a different vision. I had a different vision of who I was as a 23-year-old, misguided, Hispanic, first-generation Cuban American, influenced by bad influences, but I had a vision of how did I want to return to society. To be able to put on a suit and tie and have nobody know that I served a day in prison unless I told them. And so I've told you, my whole life, I've taken more than one of every 2 breaths in my life inside of federal prisons. So what can we do to persuade other people who are living without hope, who believe that they are on the margins, who do not realize that there is a place for them in society, not because they are angry, because they all live with aspirations. As the earlier speaker spoke, the professor from USC spoke, we all live with aspirations, but when you don't feel you have a path, you are in trouble. And it's my job to persuade each of you that we all have a role to play in ending mass incarceration. Mass incarceration hasn't been with us forever. It is a relatively new concept in American society that began in the 1960s. Prior to that, the data shows that we incarcerated on par with other advanced civilizations. But today, we lead the world not only in innovative technology and medicine, but also in the world's prison population levels. And who's going in there? The people who are lacking or perceive that they lack an opportunity to become one with society. And as a consequence of that, while they're serving time, they reject the message of society because in prison, nothing matters to them but enough calendar pages turn. All they're trying to do is complete their sentence. Why? Because there is no incentive. There is no approach to pursue excellence. And so an individual who is working to advance himself and earn college degrees or develop credentials that will help him prepare for success is no different from somebody who's keeping up with the Kardashians. And that is a fundamental flaw. It is a flaw that none of the business leaders here would stand for. So to change this approach to mass incarceration, We need people from all sectors of society to get involved. We need politicians to understand that this is a recipe for intergenerational failure. It is the greatest social injustice of our time. And so if you want to think big, think bigger. Think how we can change this criminal justice system. If you're a lawyer, think about steps that you can take to bring awareness to it. If you're involved in the media, think about what we can do to spread awareness about why we as a society cannot continue with this path to mass incarceration. When I was incarcerated initially, our country incarcerated fewer than 600,000 people. Today, it is 2.3 million people at a cost north of $75 billion a year. That same trajectory into the future will lead to 10 million people being in prison in 25 years. So we need to change. We need to look at the problem and say, what can we do differently? And I can tell you what my role in doing things differently are. My role is I work to create programs for those who are in custody so that they can understand the seeds that they are sowing today will either prepare them for success or it will prepare them for a return trip to the penitentiary. The theory I hold is that because I served 9,500 days, it is well documented, and because I walked through my share of puddles of blood and yet came back to society differently from what anyone would expect, those people in prison will listen to me a lot more so than they will listen to an educator who's never walked in their shoes. And so I'm very grateful to be creating these programs, to have funding from philanthropists like the California Wellness Foundation, who has allowed me to develop my program and introduce it. Where did I start? Right here, in the bastion of innovation, where I teach at Santa Clara County Juvenile Hall, or I'm working with the mayor's gang task force to help others see that they can become one with society, but it doesn't happen with happy talk, and it doesn't happen by accident. The second approach that I take is working to help the formerly incarcerated transition into the labor market, and that's what I am going to ask each of you. Connect with me. If you have jobs available for entry-level workers, let the people whom I have trained to come and work with you, to start developing their career. That is what my program is about. People who want to live as law-abiding citizens, we need to give them a path. And we need to employ people like me who have gone through the system and come back whole to show them how. And the third prong of my approach is to spread awareness, which is what I am grateful to be doing today, 6 months after I have been released. I'm also a lecturer at San Francisco State University. As crazy as that might sound, the first time I stepped foot on a university campus, they offered me a job. So I teach a course at San Francisco State University called the Architecture of Incarceration, because that is another prong of my approach, to let the future criminal justice leaders of society know that we need to do something different. We need it to be like Silicon Valley, innovative, disruptive. And I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story with you.